The 10 chess commandments. These are 10 chess principles that are so important that you absolutely must follow them in order for you to skyrocket your rating to the next level. And if you don't follow them, your chess career is going to be very painful. I'm sorry to hear. Anyway, I have 10 examples broken down for you. Very easy to follow. Let's get into it. Let's play some chess. All right, the first commandment, and arguably maybe the most important, is development in chess. And we do that in the opening by moving the same, not moving the same piece twice. We want to move each piece once in the opening, and all that basically means, as simple as it sounds, is just move the pieces off their starting positions. It's all you have to do, and you want to put them in the center of the board. So all these pieces are aimed at the center. They're controlling central squares. This is what we want to do. And if our opponent doesn't play like this, and we do, you'll see that all of our pieces are in the game. We also want a castle, and then we just move every single piece, and we're castled. So now our rooks are in the game, our knights, our bishops, our queen. That's all we need to do. And our opponent did not do this. And this is going to be a very easy game to win for white because all of our opponent's pieces are effectively not in the game. And just to illustrate that, if I wanted to move forward now, I could just simply infiltrate very easily, and it's very hard for black to do anything in this position. I could simply come forward, and if black just keeps on pushing pawns or something, I have all my pieces are ready for the attack, and this would be checkmate already. That's just one example of how important it is to develop all of your pieces. Okay. The second commandment is double pawns. We don't want to allow double pawns unless they're unless it affects our activity. Like if we have double pawns and it opens up a lane to the king maybe, and we have queens on the board. But other than that, we don't want double isolated pawns. In this position, how would we not allow black to give us double pawns? Black wants to take the knight, giving us double pawns. Therefore, we'd have to play bishop d2 here. That would be a good move. And now if black decides to move, we have alleviated the double pawns. We have no double pawns here. However, white in this position castled. And now we have double weak isolated pawns, which can easily be picked off in the endgame. These are two weaknesses. It's a burden on our position. So that is another important concept to learn and know it, guys. Remember it. It's very important. Early queen attacks is the third commandment, and here we have an early queen attack from white. I'm sure you guys seen this a lot, and the bishop comes out here, and then you play something, and you get checkmated in 4 moves. No one likes that. That's embarrassing, right? But early queen attack shouldn't work. So after queen h5, we simply play knight c6, defending the pawn here. We also don't want to play g6 here because that check loses the rook. So we play knight c6, defending the pawn. Now the bishop comes out, and now we play g6. Now it's okay because there's no queen check winning the rook because our knight's defending the pawn. Now let's say the queen comes back here. We just, again, develop and defend. We defend with development. If the queen took here, we would just take it, so we can't do that. And then we just simply put the bishop here, fiend kettle bishop, castle, and we're fine. Now, after this move g6, if the queen comes back here, the queen being overexposed is often a burden. And in fact, we can win material here simply by playing d5. This unleashes an attack on the queen and hits the bishop. You have to protect the queen, and then you lose the bishop. So early queen attacks, taking the queen out too early is a big no-no in chess. Okay, the next commandment is stopping your opponent from castling. You want to keep your opponent's king in the center. We want to be castled, and we want our king safe in the corner of the board. Conversely, if we can stop our opponent from doing that and keep his king in the center, then we could tee off on it and later on attack it. So in this position, how can black keep white king from castling? Simple. We play bishop a6. Now it's cutting off the king. The king cannot castle through check, so the king's going to be stuck in the center for a long time. And there also is no light square bishop to combat us. So we just completely own this, And it's going to be hard for white to castle here and untangle his position. And in the meantime, we're going to launch an attack and try to checkmate the king. Which brings us into the next commandment. The next commandment is to castle your king. You want your king on the corner of the board. You don't want it in the center of the board. Here, white is already in trouble because the king is not castled and we have an undefended piece here. So here, black can immediately take control of the game with queen d4. This threatens checkmate. It's also threatening the knight. The bishop is attacked by the knight, but the knight's going to go away somewhere. So let's say we just defend checkmate. Now we lose a knight, and we're losing the game. Notice there's no fork here because we just take the pawn there. So that's just one example of why we want to clear the king out of the way. We want to castle as soon as possible in chess. This is going to save you a lot of lost games in chess. Which brings us to the next commandment. The next commandment is trading down material when we're ahead in material, when we have a lead in material. So if we have a lead in material, trading down pieces and pawns just makes the game easier to convert into a win. You'll see in this position that black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. We all have the same amount of pieces, but these 2 pawns, this lead is very hard to still win the game with all these pieces on the board. So how do we start forcing some trades here to make the game easier to win, to pretty much optimize our 2-pawn lead and accentuate that lead? So let's say we have a trade here, then we have another trade, check, black takes back. Now, how do we force the queen trade? Well, the queen's diagonal to the king. It's on the same diagonal. We could play queen c4 here, forcing a queen trade. And after this trade, now we have 2 pawns here and a 2-pawn lead. And this game should be easy to win. And we have a pass pawn here. We can guide it up the board, get our rooks behind it, and win the game. Okay, so now we have a much clearer way to win this game than we did before, just by simply trading down material. Okay, which brings us into the next commandment. The next commandment is creating pass pawns. So we want to create pass pawns. They're extremely important, very dangerous to deal with, and it allows us to pretty much get a winning position. Here in this game, we have a pawn lead, but we don't want to blow it. If we've made a move like this, okay, now we can't do anything. Black is permanently blockading this pawn is blockaded, and we can't move further up the board. Right now, we're pretty much stuck. If we ever tried to move forward, black would just take us. Okay, we also don't want to make this move, which prepares before. A lot of players make that mistake. But here, black has a killer move here. Black plays a4, and now we're completely blockaded. We can't play this to break through because black also gets a pass pawn, and not only that, a much faster one. And if we play b4, black has en passant with the same idea. So for that reason, the way to create a pass pawn here is actually to play b3 first. Again, if black plays here, we just take. And now we play a3. And now our next move is going to be b4. And now we're successfully created a pass pawn. Black has to stop this, but in the meantime, this is just going to be a decoy. We're actually going to switch gears and take this pawn and then get this pass pawn to queen. So now we're just going to go over here. Black has to get rid of this pawn. And now we just simply guide this pass pawn to queen, and we win the game. So that's what we want to do. We want to create pass pawns. Always look for opportunities to do that because it could result in an easy way to win a chess game. Which brings us back to the next commandment. What do we do when we have rooks on the board when we have pass pawns? Well, we want to get the rooks behind the pass pawn when we're escorting them up the board and also when we're defending them. So here in this position, white wants to be behind the pawn, and black wants to be behind the pawn to defend it. Now, in this position, what do we play? We simply get behind the pawn, and we want a queen. So black has to intercept it, and now black has to play this. Now black's rook is stuck in the corner for the rest of the game. And now we just simply bring our king in, and we just bounce the rook off this square, and then queen, and now we're up an entire rook, and we're winning the game. Finally, the final commandment, the 10th commandment, is when kings are castled on opposite sides of the board of each other, we want to launch the pawns at each other's king to soften up their fortress. Why don't we do that when kings are on the same side of the board? That's because if we push the pawns, yes, we could potentially weaken their fortress, but we're definitely weakening our own by pushing pawns in front of our own king. So for that reason, we push the pawns on the wings. We attack, and both sides want to push the pawns, and the idea is to weaken the king. So in this position, white would follow up with something like h5 here, and now we would open up this file, and we want to double the rooks, maybe put the queen here, go for some checkmate eventually sometime if the knight and bishop wasn't here. But it's just a prelude to the attack. It's basically softening up the fortress, the king's position, before we move in and attack. There you have it. Those are the 10 chess commandments. These are things you need to follow in order to get better at chess, become a real chess player, and watch your rating soar through the ranks. And if you like this material, please make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Really does help the channel. Really will appreciate it. And like always, get out there and go play some chess.